Just 3 weeks and a day till America votes, and the polls are tighter than ever. Kamala Harris has enjoyed a lead in the national polls, but they don't tell you how the Electoral College will shake down, and it's that college that determines the winner. Even so, Donald Trump is narrowing her national lead. In the latest ABC national poll, Harris is on 50%, Trump is on 48%. That's well within the polling margin of error. Harris was 5 points ahead last month. In the latest NBC poll, Harris and Trump are even Stevens on 48% each among registered voters. Again, Harris was clearly ahead last month. It's even closer in the swing states that will determine the outcome. In Pennsylvania, the swing state with the biggest number of electoral college seats, 19 since you were asking there, the latest poll of polls puts Trump on, now listen to this, Trump 48.2%, Harris 48.1%. It doesn't get closer than that. And remember, no Democrat has made it to the White House since 1948 without taking the Keystone Gate. It's almost as close in Georgia, another swing state. Trump is on 48.2%, Harris on 47.5%. When the polls are this close, you can't really tell who's going to win. So let's go first to Kim Lyons, editor of the Pennsylvania Capital Star newspaper. Kim, let me begin by asking you a simple question. What makes Pennsylvania such a swing state? Is it the combination of two big urban centers, Philadelphia in the east, Pittsburgh in the west, which are overwhelmingly Democrat, but everywhere in between, the smaller towns, the rural areas, they're strongly Republican. Is that the key?
That is a big part of the key. But also, Pennsylvania has the potential to be flipped. You'll remember Barack Obama won it twice, Donald Trump won it in 2016, and Joe Biden won it in 2020. So there's a lot of potential for both parties. It's a very enticing, obviously the 19 electoral votes, as you mentioned, very enticing. Can't really win. Either candidate doesn't really have a path to victory without Pennsylvania. But you really touched on, I think, what makes Pennsylvania unique, that it has these two big urban areas. It has several other smaller cities. I think of Erie in the northwestern part of the state, which is where Kamala Harris will be later today. That's considered a really pivotal county in itself. It's got an urban area. It's got a large rural area. So there's a lot of different personalities of Pennsylvania as far as its politics. I think a lot of the areas that were considered safe Republican areas this year look a little more like they might be in play. So we've seen Kamala Harris go into traditionally Republican areas like Johnstown, and like Reading is an area where candidates have spent a lot of time. So there's a lot of potential to shift things from 2020 and 2016 in this election. I think both campaigns are really aware of it.
In the state, on the national issues, the economy, immigration, cost of living, which the polls suggest are the issues that people care most about, are these also the issues in Pennsylvania, or are there more local issues, more state issues that could affect the election too? We know Pennsylvania is a fracking station, and we know that Kamala Harris has been a bit all over the place on fracking. Is it national, or will there be local input?
I really think that the significance of fracking in this campaign has been kind of overstated. It is part of the industry in Western Pennsylvania, where I'm based, but it is not a statewide issue of great significance to as large a swath of voters as I think maybe has been portrayed. Definitely economic issues top the concerns of most of the people that I've spoken to, that we hear from, from other media, just from polling, from people we're speaking to. They're really concerned about, as we say, these sort of pocketbook, kitchen table issues that affect their bottom line. How are they going to pay their taxes? How are they going to, make sure they have food on the table, make sure their kids have what they need for school? So that is the overwhelming and mainly the most issue that is of the most concern, I think, to Pennsylvanians, no matter what part of the state you're in, whether you're in Philadelphia or Altoona or Reading or Pittsburgh, that is really it informs so much of people's decision making right now that they can't but be really hyper focused on it.
Well, maybe Mr. Trump will take some comfort in that, because I look at this NBC poll, and in it, Mr. Trump leads Kamala Harris by 11 points on who is better able to manage the rising cost of living. Now, I'm not quite sure why people think that he is, but that's what they say. If that's the pocketbook issue you refer to, that would seem to be a plus for Donald Trump.
Well, you could make that argument, and Trump has made that argument. However, Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, was in Pittsburgh last week, and he made the point that, Donald Trump sort of touts this great economy he had, but Obama says, well, yeah, that was my economy that I handed to him when I left office. Things were in really good economic shape, and so he sort of walked into the White House with a much different economic reality than Obama did when he first took office. So, I think Trump has tried to take credit for that economy that maybe is not as well earned as he might suggest that it is. And I think that Kamala Harris has done a lot to introduce voters to her ideas, her plans for how she would tackle some of the most serious issues that they're worried about. This morning, for example, she unveiled a huge sweeping proposal that would focus on creating economic and social opportunities for Black men. That's a demographic that she struggled a little bit with in the polls. Obama addressed that when he was in Pittsburgh as well, saying, Black men really should be coming together behind a candidate who represents them and knows their experiences much more strongly than Donald Trump does. So I think she's really worked to introduce really specific economic proposals that will affect Pennsylvanians and Americans across the economic spectrum as far as economic issues and caregiving and all of, starting a business, all of the things that, run into.
We're going to move. Sorry to interrupt. We're going to go to Georgia in a minute, but just before we do, who's going to win Pennsylvania?
I think Kamala Harris is going to do it. I think it's going to be very, very close. We won't know on election night, but I think it's going to be her.
All right. We'll be back the next day to make sure to hold you to account. That's Kim Lyons from the Pennsylvania Capital Star newspaper. Let's now head to this other must-win state, Georgia, where we have Maya King, who reports on politics in the southeast U.S. for the New York Times. She's based in Atlanta, Georgia. Maya, let me ask you the same question. Why is Georgia such a swing state? Is it because you've got this massive conurbation in Atlanta, which is overwhelmingly Democrat, but the rest of the rural areas of the state are strongly Republican? Is that why it's a swing state?
Well, that's essentially what it boils down to. Yes, you have these two pockets, the metro Atlanta area, which has just exploded in population growth, has a lot of younger folks, young people of color who tend to lean more Democratic, and also the Savannah area, which is a little bit smaller, but also very heavily Democratic. Mm-hmm. But the rest of the state, you're absolutely right, is largely rural and conservative. There are some Black voters in these rural areas who do tend to support Democrats, but they're not exactly the majority. What really comes down to it, though, in Georgia is who can mobilize and organize their voters the best, who can get their folks out to the polls. And I think that's what Democrats really did well in 2020 and again in 2022, which contributed to President Biden's very razor-thin win 4 years ago, and that of Senator Raphael Warnock in the U.S. Senate runoffs in 2022. And that's really what I'm seeing quite a bit on the ground, is both Democrats and Republicans really working hard to engage, mobilize their voters, and of course get them
the vote out
as early voting starts on Tuesday.
Now, they say Hollywood doesn't make political films anymore, but less than a month before the US election comes The Apprentice, a Donald Trump origin story, which charts how Trump went from insecure, aspiring businessman to the man we know today under the mentorship of the infamous American lawyer Roy Cohn. Well, I saw the film last night and it had me gripped, and the film's writer Gabriel Sherman joins me now. Hello, Gabriel.
Good to be here.
Thanks for being with us. Look, before we talk about the film itself, let's talk about how hard it's been to get it made. Like, even after Trump lost in 2020, you found it quite difficult to get studios to finance it, right?
Yes, this film for me as the writer has been a 7-year journey. I started writing the screenplay in 2017, shortly after Trump won the 2016 election and became president. And so this has been an uphill journey. Hollywood has generally not wanted to touch this film. And so, it's a miracle and beyond grateful that now audiences can see the film. It's out finally.
And after it premiered in Cannes, Trump said he was going to sue to block the movie's release, which I don't believe he did. Were you excited that he might launch legal action? That would really help the film?
Unfortunately, the threat, which was following the rules that Roy Cohn taught him in the film, in a certain way, art was imitating life, or life was imitating art, as I should say. But the baseless threat that he launched against the film had the intended effect of really making Hollywood studios run away from the film and not want to distribute it in America. And we finally found a small independent distributor, Briarcliff Entertainment, who had the guts to take on the film, and it's now out in theaters in America last weekend and will be out across the world in the next few days. But this morning, in fact, actually Trump launched an attack on the film on his social media site, Truth Social, and called it baseless and a bunch of other really vicious things. And I think it's really just a testament that this movie is not political. It's just trying to, talk about him as a human being. And for Trump, somebody who crafts this larger than life persona, I think that's very threatening, that, he wants his followers to see him sort of as beyond human. And I think in this film, both Jeremy Strong, who plays Roy Cohn, and Sebastian Stan, who plays Trump, they just deliver these very subtle human performances that kind of bring Trump down to earth.
Yeah, I mean, except for in one vital respect that we'll come on to talk about, it is a very humanizing portrait of Donald Trump. It's, I mean, particularly at the beginning, I almost found myself liking him, right?
Yeah, and that's, it's based on, all of my research. And, part of this film is trying to explain on a psychological level, how does somebody become like the megalomaniacal person we see Trump is today. And there's an interview that I saw that he did. I think it was his first nationally televised interview in 1980. It's on YouTube, and your listeners can Google it. And he sits down with the TV personality Rona Barrett. And when you see him during this exchange, he's very soft-spoken, he's polite, he's articulate. And I think for me, that was a reference point to see, okay, this is what Trump was like 40 years ago, and this is what he's like today. And the film is trying to chart that evolution.
How he got from one to the other, sure. Well, so it's as much a film about Roy Cohn. Tell us about who he was, because people might not necessarily be familiar with him.
Yeah, no, I mean, this generation probably has not heard a lot about Roy Cohn, but he played basically one of the most fundamental roles in shaping conservative American politics in the 20th century. He was a wunderkind lawyer. He graduated from Columbia Law School, I believe, at age 19. He went to work for the Justice Department, and he prosecuted the Russian spies Julius and Ethel Rosenberg for giving the Soviets atomic bomb secrets. He sent both of those people to the electric chair, and it was very controversial at the time because they were both parents with young children, and Roy Cohn, as the prosecutor, showed them no mercy. And from there, he went to Washington to work for Senator Joseph McCarthy, who was the leading Republican who was going after suspected communists in the American government. And Roy Cohn, as his young assistant, was really responsible for creating a hysteria, this sort of anti-communist hysteria that swept America in the 1950s. And so from there, he moved to New York and became a power broker, lawyer, and fixer for the most influential New Yorkers, and really was sort of a behind-the-scenes player.
And he becomes a sort of a mentor for Trump.
Of course,
in many respects.
And that's what the film chronicles, is how in 1973, Trump met Roy Cohn, and Roy took him under his wing and taught him his 3 rules for success.
And without wanting to give too much away, there's a kind of almost like a Falstaff situation sort of looming where Trump decides he's no longer useful, having sort of absorbed these lessons, really. In writing Trump and writing the character of Trump, how hard was it to avoid parody?
I think that's a great question. That was the sort of one of the central challenges of this movie is, Donald Trump is so ubiquitous in the media, and he's such a ripe subject for comedy. I wanted to go in the opposite direction, and I think less is more. I tried to not play into the catchphrases and the mannerisms that he does today.
I mean, they're there, but they're subtle. Yeah.
And they become more prominent as the film develops. I think you see the persona of Trump emerging over the course of the film. But when we meet him at the start of the film, he's, you see kind of some sort of little bits of it, but they're very subtle.
Yeah. Look, most controversially about the film, and I wish we had longer, but most controversially about the film, there's a scene in which Trump rapes his first wife, Ivana, after she's rude about his weight and specifically his hairline, which is an allegation she made in court but then retracted, and he's always denied. And it was that scene which really caused you the most problems in getting this film made. Did you ever think of taking it out?
No, I mean, honestly, I didn't. I fought for that scene. I think artistically and for the story that we're telling, it was essential. Trump has been credibly accused by more than a dozen women of sexual misconduct, and he was found liable by a New York jury for assaulting the writer E. Jean Carroll. So this is part of his character. He obviously has denied it, but I felt that a film exploring his origin story had to reckon with his misogyny. And so, maybe it was not a smart business decision, but artistically, I felt that scene had to stay in. And I feel like it, obviously created controversy, but it is based on the public record. I think we just remind your listeners, yes, Ivana Trump amended her statement, but she only retracted it 25 years after the alleged incident. So for me, I felt the scene was emotionally true to the character that I was writing in the film.
Yeah. Okay. And look, Trump, he's spoken out about the film. Do you think he'll watch it? What do you think he'd make of it if he did watch it?
Well, he attacked the film this morning. I don't know if he's seen it. We have offered to screen it for him, but we should point out that his allies, like Roger Stone, who has a cameo in the film, he has seen it and described it as accurate. And so this is not an attack on Donald Trump. I mean, it is not. It's a humanistic character, and perhaps Donald Trump does things that people don't like, but it's not from a political standpoint.
Yeah, sure. Look, Gabriel Sherman, thank you very much indeed. And the film is The Apprentice.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Gabriel.